The dust had not yet settled when Elias Moore heard the horse pull up. He was standing by the fence line, one boot braced against a sun-warped post, the iron head of his hammer resting loosely in his palm. He had been working since dawn, replacing a rail that had sagged through years of wind and neglect. The sound did not belong there. Horses did not stop at his ranch unless he expected them to. Elias looked up. The rider was already dismounting. He recognized the man at once. Rafe Kellen. He knew the set of his shoulders, the way he moved like he owned whatever ground his boots touched. Kellen did not greet him. He did not nod or tip his hat. Instead, he reached back, seized the woman behind him, and dragged her from the saddle. She hit the ground hard. The impact knocked the breath from her chest, but she did not cry out. No scream, no plea. She rolled onto one elbow, dirt clinging to her skin, blood streaking her forearm where it had been scraped raw. Her hair had come loose, dark against the pale dust, but her eyes were sharp, too sharp for someone who had just been thrown aside like cargo. Elias did not move. Rafe Kellen adjusted his reins as if nothing of consequence had happened. "Keep the animal," he said, his voice flat, dismissive. "Don't touch her, I'll be back." Then he swung into the saddle and rode away. No explanation, no hesitation. The sound of hooves faded down the road toward Dry Creek, leaving behind silence, heat, and a woman struggling to breathe in the dirt of Elias Moore's yard. Elias stood where he was, the hammer suddenly heavy in his hand. He had not chosen this moment. He had not invited it. But the truth settled quickly and without argument. If he turned his back now, she would not live through the night. Elias crouched several steps away, careful not to crowd her. He had learned long ago that distance could be as important as help. He studied her the way he studied injured livestock, not coldly but thoroughly. The shallow rise of her chest, the tremor in her hand as she pushed herself upright, the way her jaw remained set, not in fear but refusal. She did not ask for help. She did not thank him. She watched him. "You don't belong here," Elias said at last. His voice was low, unused to unnecessary words. The sound of it seemed to surprise them both. Her gaze flicked to him, dark, measuring. She did not answer. That silence told him more than words would have. People who were afraid talked too much. Silence like this was something else. Pride, perhaps, or pain held tightly in check. The sun was already lowering, stretching long shadows across the yard. Elias knew what came next. He knew how quickly the desert turned cruel when daylight slipped away. He also knew what trouble followed wounded Apache women. For a long moment, he weighed the dangers he understood against the one he did not. Then he stood. "You can stay," he said, "until you're strong enough to leave." He did not explain why. He did not need to. Elias fetched water first. He moved slowly, deliberately, the way he did with nervous horses. He set the tin cup within her reach and stepped back. She watched every movement, her eyes tracking his hands, his boots, the angle of his body as he made sure never to loom over her. When she reached for the cup, her fingers shook. Something tightened briefly in Elias's chest. "Drink slow," he said. Not a command, just information. She ignored him and drank anyway. After a few swallows, pain caught up with her. Her breath hitched. She stopped, waiting for it to pass. She did not look to him for help. That mattered. "You can walk?" he asked. After a moment, she said, "I can stand." That would have to be enough. The cabin was plain. One table, one chair, a narrow bed against the wall. The smell of old smoke and wood hung in the air. Nothing suggested company. Nothing suggested welcome. Elias cleared the table and laid out what he had. Clean cloth, a small bottle of alcohol, a knife he had already wiped down. She tensed when she saw the blade. "It's for the cloth," he said, setting it aside. She studied his face, searching for something he did not offer. Whatever she found there made her look away. The wound along her arm was worse than he had thought. Scrapes torn deep, bruising already darkening beneath the skin. Elias worked carefully. His touch was brief and purposeful. He did not apologize when she flinched. He did not offer comfort he could not guarantee. When he finished, he stepped back. "You fight hard," he said, before he could stop himself. Her mouth curved, not into a smile, but something sharper. He nodded once and turned away. Outside, the sky darkened into a deep, cooling blue. Elias fed the animals, checked the fence, kept his hands busy. He did not tell himself stories about who she was or where she would go. People arrived in trouble. People left when they could. The ranch was not meant to hold anything in place. Still, as the stars sharpened overhead, he listened. Inside the cabin, her breathing steadied. At one point, she murmured something in her own language, low, controlled. It sounded less like fear and more like a promise. Elias did not understand the words. He understood the tone. He sat on the step, hat pulled low, eyes fixed on the dark land beyond the fence. This was how trouble began. Not with gunfire, not with shouting, but with a single choice made quietly, without witnesses. And for a man like Elias Moore, that was never a small thing. Morning came without ceremony. The sun rose pale and steady over the San Pedro Valley, lifting the night's cold from the ground inch by inch. Elias Moore was already awake. He moved through his routines the way he always did, methodical, unhurried, as if time were measured in work completed rather than hours passed. He checked the troughs first. The cattle stirred at his approach, familiar with his shape, his pace. He counted them without thinking. Habit had long since replaced effort. A loose rail along the east fence sagged where the soil had softened overnight. Elias tightened it, driving the post deeper into the ground with 3 clean strikes. Only then did he glance toward the cabin. He half expected it to be empty. It was not. The woman stood in the doorway, one shoulder resting lightly against the frame. Her injured arm was bound and held close to her body. Pain had drawn her face tight, but her posture remained straight. She watched him without speaking, her gaze steady and unblinking. "You should sit," Elias said, not looking directly at her. "Morning comes hard after a night like that." "I've had harder," she replied. Her voice was low, controlled. There was no complaint in it, no invitation for sympathy. Elias nodded once and returned to his work. Advice offered where it wasn't asked for often sounded like judgment. He had learned that lesson early. They settled into an uneasy rhythm. He left food where she could reach it, cornbread, dried meat, fresh water drawn from the well. He did not hover. He did not ask questions that did not belong to him. When he spoke, it was only to explain what needed explaining. Which gate stuck when the wind shifted, where the shade held longest in the afternoon, how far it was to the road that led back toward town. She listened. Sometimes she answered, often she did not. By the second day, she could walk the length of the yard without stopping. By the third, she sat outside while Elias worked, her eyes following the slow movement of his hands. She studied him the way one might study a tool, not for beauty, not for comfort, but for balance, for reliability. "You live close to the town," she said one afternoon. "Close enough," he answered, "but you don't belong to it." Elias considered that. He wiped his hands on his trousers. "I do my buying there." "That's usually enough," she said. The words were sharp, but not careless. There was something almost amused beneath them. A man who wants the benefits of people without the burden of them. Elias did not bristle. He had long since learned that truth, when spoken plainly, did not require defense. "People can carry more burden than they know," he said. "Sometimes they put it on others without asking." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "You speak as if you've seen it." "I have." That was all he offered. The days passed without marking themselves. Elias noticed things he told himself did not matter. The way she favored her uninjured arm, the way her eyes went to the horizon at dusk, the way she flinched not at sudden sounds, but at laughter drifting faintly from the direction of Dry Creek. She noticed things too. She noticed that Elias never entered the cabin without making noise first, even when he thought she was asleep. That his rifle was always within reach, but never laid out where it could be taken as a warning. That when a rider passed on the distant road, Elias stood where she could see him, never blocking her path, never placing himself between her and open land. "You don't trust easily," she said one evening. "Trust's expensive," he replied. "I don't buy it often." She studied him for a long moment. "And yet you let a stranger stay." Elias met her gaze briefly. "I let someone heal." That answer unsettled her more than any excuse might have. On the 4th day, she spoke her name, Atsa. Elias nodded, accepting it without comment. Names mattered. He knew that. They were anchors, sometimes burdens. He did not give her his in return, not yet. That night, as the wind moved through the grass and the cattle settled into sleep, Elias found himself thinking about the choice he was making without meaning to. Every hour she remained on his land made it harder to pretend this was temporary, harder to convince himself that his responsibility ended with her wounds closing. He remembered another time, years ago, when he had told himself that silence was safer than truth, when he had believed that managing information was the same as protecting people. The memory came heavy and unwelcome. He pushed it away and focused on the present, the fire crackling, the steady breathing from inside the cabin, the simple fact that tonight no one was in immediate danger. By the end of the week, Atsa was strong enough to help. She did not ask. She simply began. She mended a tier in a feed sack, swept the cabin floor, carried water in smaller buckets. Elias watched from a distance, uneasy with the sight. Help, when it came uninvited, had a way of binding people together. He was not sure he wanted that kind of bond. "You don't have to," he said once. "I know," she replied. "That's why I do." The answer stayed with him long after she walked away. As they sat in the shade one afternoon, she spoke again. Her tone was different this time, less guarded, more measured. "You don't look at me the way others do." Elias frowned slightly. "How's that? As if I owe you something." The truth of it surprised him. He looked down at his hands, rough, scarred, resting uselessly in his lap. "I don't want anything from you." She studied his face, searching for the lie. Whatever she found there made her nod slowly. "Then you're rarer than you think." That night, Elias lay awake longer than usual, staring at the ceiling. He realized with quiet unease that his fear was no longer of the trouble she might bring to his door. It was of what it meant that he cared whether she stayed or left. For a man who had built his life around standing apart, that realization was the most dangerous thing of all. Rafe Kellen came back just before sunset. Elias saw him first from the far end of the pasture, a dark shape cutting across pale land, riding without hurry. That alone told Elias something was wrong. Rafe was not a man who took his time unless he believed the ground beneath him was solid. Elias set his fence tool down and waited. Atsa was near the cabin, folding cloth she had washed earlier. She noticed the change in Elias's posture before she followed his gaze. Her body stiffened instantly, not with fear, but with recognition. Her hand moved toward the knife she now carried at her belt. "He's back," she said. "I know." Rafe dismounted a few yards from the house. His smile was easy. His eyes were not. He looked from Elias to Atsa and back again, taking in the distance between them, the way neither stood behind the other. "Well," Rafe said lightly, "she's still breathing." "I'll give you that." Elias did not answer. Rafe's gaze lingered on Atsa, then slid back. "I figured you'd do what you do best. Keep things quiet. Keep your head down." "She's not yours," Elias said. Rafe laughed softly. "Everything's someone's, out here. Just depends who's willing to say it out loud." He stepped closer. Atsa shifted slightly, placing herself just behind Elias, not hiding, not retreating, choosing her angle. Elias felt the movement more than he saw it. Something firm settled inside him. "You don't want this trouble," Rafe continued. "I do business. You keep cattle. No need to mix the two." "You dragged her here," Elias said. "You made it my business." Rafe's smile thinned. "I gave you a favor, somewhere safe while things cooled down." "She's not cooling down," Elias replied, "and neither are you." For a moment, Rafe's eyes hardened. "Careful. You're not built for this kind of loyalty." Elias turned fully toward him. "This isn't loyalty." Rafe tilted his head. "Then what is it?" Elias thought of the quiet days, the careful distance, the lie he had told himself, that she would leave as soon as she could. "It's a line," he said at last, "and you crossed it." Rafe's hand dropped toward his gun. Elias stepped forward and placed himself squarely between Rafe and Atsa. The movement was unremarkable, almost casual. It changed everything. Atsa inhaled sharply. She had not asked for this. She had not expected it. Rafe stared, disbelief flickering across his face. "You serious?" "Yes." "You'd risk your land? Your name?" Elias did not look back. "I'd risk myself." That was when Rafe understood. And when he did, his expression shifted, not to anger, but calculation. Rafe Kellen stepped back first, not because he was afraid, but because he was thinking. "All right," he said slowly, lifting both hands just enough to show he meant no immediate harm. "No need to make this uglier than it has to be." He took another step back, boots sinking slightly into the dry soil. "I'll leave," he continued, "for now." Elias did not move. Rafe's eyes flicked once more toward Atsa. then returned to Elias. But you're keeping something that doesn't belong to you. Sooner or later, that always costs. Elias said nothing. Rafe mounted his horse, his gaze lingering on the ranch as if committing its shape to memory. Enjoy the quiet while it lasts. He rode off toward the lengthening shadows, the sound of hooves fading slowly, deliberately, as though meant to be remembered. For a long moment, neither Elias nor Atsa spoke. You didn't have to do that, she said finally. I know. Then why did you? Elias exhaled slowly. The air left his chest heavier than it had entered. Because once, he said, a long time ago, I stayed quiet when I shouldn't have. She studied him then, not defensively, not sharply, but with a calm that carried weight. And what did it cost you? He met her eyes. Everything that mattered. The sun slipped below the hills, drawing the valley into dusk. The cattle shifted uneasily. Somewhere far off, a bird cried out and fell silent. He'll come back, Atsa said. I know. And you still chose this. Yes, she nodded, slow and deliberate. Then whatever happens next, she said, you won't face it alone. Elias did not sleep that night. He sat on the step outside the cabin, his rifle laid across his knees, watching the dark. He did not tell himself Rafe was gone. Men like Rafe did not leave cleanly. They waited. They watched. They convinced themselves patience was the same as control. Elias felt no fear, only a strange, steady calm. He had made his choice. Whatever came with it would have to come honestly. Rafe Kellen did not ride far. He circled wide, keeping to low ground where mesquite grew thick and the land dipped just enough to hide a man and his horse from view. He told himself he was patient. That waiting was part of the work. Trouble, after all, ripened in its own time. He tethered the horse beneath a stand of scrub and settled in, rifle across his knees. From where he crouched, he could see the faint outline of Elias Moore's cabin against the dark. A single lantern burned low inside. Then it went out. Rafe smiled to himself. Men like Elias always thought they could draw a line and have the world respect it. Rafe had learned long ago that lines were only suggestions. What mattered was who stepped over them first. He meant to wait until the ranch slept, meant to move quietly, meant to finish things clean. Instead, the night cooled faster than he expected. The ground leached warmth from his bones. The silence pressed in heavy and dull. He shifted his weight, told himself he would rest his eyes for a moment. Sleep took him anyway. At the ranch, Elias remained awake. He moved the cattle closer to the corral, checked the fence twice, left the rifle where his hand could find it without looking. Inside the cabin, Atsa sat near the wall, her knife within reach, her hands resting loosely in her lap. They did not speak much. Words would only circle truths already known. You should sleep, she said once. So should you. She nodded. Neither moved. Time passed in pieces, the lowing of cattle, the whisper of wind through grass, the slow arc of stars overhead. Elias thought of the man he had been when silence felt safer than choice. He wondered if that man would recognize him now. Just before dawn, the light began to change. It was subtle at first, a thinning of darkness, a softening at the edge of the sky. Elias felt it more than he saw it. He stood and stepped outside, breathing in the cool air. That was when he heard voices, not close, not urgent, measured. Atsa was beside him instantly, eyes narrowed, listening. They're mine, she said quietly. My people. Relief passed through Elias, not sharp, not triumphant, just steady. He nodded and stayed where he was, hands visible, posture open. From the low ridge to the east, 3 figures emerged, moving with the confidence of those who knew the land intimately. They carried themselves with purpose, not haste. One raised a hand in greeting when he saw Atsa. She stepped forward. Chaitan? Her brother approached, his gaze flicking briefly to Elias before returning to her. He took in the bandaged arm, the steady stance. You're alive, he said. I am. Behind him came a 4th figure, older, broader, a presence that did not need to announce itself. Hokona, Atsa said. My father. Hokona inclined his head toward Elias. You gave her shelter. She needed it, Elias replied. Hokona studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. Not gratitude, acknowledgement. The sound came suddenly, a scramble of stone from the scrub beyond the ridge, a sharp intake of breath. Rafe Kellen woke to light. Not full day, but enough to know the world had shifted against him. Panic seized him, not from fear of men, but of being seen, of losing control. He rose too quickly. His boots slid. The rifle slipped from his grasp and clattered against stone. The sound echoed loud in the morning stillness. He ran. The slope fell away faster than he expected, cut by years of water and wind. He reached for a mesquite branch. It snapped under his weight. His foot found nothing. The sound that followed was brief. Stones scattering, a dull thud, then silence. No one chased him. Chayton looked toward the ridge once, then away. It's done. Atsa closed her eyes. There was no satisfaction in her expression, only release. Elias let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. The sun broke free of the horizon, spilling light across the valley. It touched the ranch, the cattle, the figures standing together in the cool morning air. "This land remembers choices," Hokona said. "So do I," Elias replied. The older man nodded, as if that answer had been expected. The morning did not hurry them. There were no raised voices, no urgency. Whatever needed to be said between Atsa and her people was spoken softly in a language Elias did not understand. He did not try to. When they finished, Chayton turned to Elias. "She can come home," he said. "Our people are safe for now." Elias nodded. Hokona stepped forward once more. "You did not take what was not yours," he said. "You did not turn away when it would have been easier." "I didn't do more than I should." That is what most men say when they are afraid of what they chose. Atsa looked at Elias. "He didn't ask anything of me," she said. "Not even trust." Hokona inclined his head. "That matters." They rode away without looking back. The dust settled quickly. The ranch stood quiet again, changed. Elias prepared without hurry. Food, a blanket, a canteen. Atsa watched from the doorway. "You're readying me to leave," she said. "Yes. And if I don't," he turned to face her, "then you don't. Either way, it has to be yours." She walked the yard slowly, tracing the fence line, the land beyond. "I'll go with them," she said at last. "For a time." Elias nodded. "Take what you need. And when I return, this place won't be different." She smiled, small and genuine. "That's why I can come back." She left before noon, returned before sunset. She stood at the gate, not asking to be let in, only to be seen. Elias opened it. She passed through on her own. As evening settled, they worked side by side. No declarations, no claims, just two people choosing the same ground. And for the first time, Elias Moore was no longer standing apart. This time, it did not feel like a mistake. The land did not change its shape after that. The San Pedro Valley still stretched wide and patient beneath the sky. The cattle moved as they always had. The fences creaked in the wind. The dust rose and fell along the road to Dry Creek without ceremony. If a man passed the ranch in the days that followed, he would have seen nothing that marked it as different. But Elias Moore knew better. He felt it in the quiet, not the silence he had once built his life around, a silence meant to keep the world at a distance, but a quieter thing beneath it, a space that no longer pressed inward, a space that allowed for presence without demand. Atsa did not speak of staying. She did not speak of leaving either. She moved through the days with purpose, not caution. When she worked fully. When she rested, she did so without apology. Elias noticed how naturally she took her place beside him, not behind, not ahead. When choices came, they were discussed plainly, without assumption. There were no promises made, none were needed. Dry Creek noticed eventually. A rider mentioned seeing Apache tracks near the ranch. Another said Rafe Kellen had not been seen since early morning weeks ago. Speculation moved the way it always did, quiet at first, then sharpening at the edges. Elias did not offer explanations. When asked, he answered simply. When pressed, he said nothing. Most people learned quickly that Elias Moore was not a man who could be argued into revealing more than he intended. The ranch remained what it had always been to the town, a place slightly apart, close enough to be seen, far enough to be left alone. One evening, as the sun sank low and the valley turned gold, Atsa stood at the fence line, watching the horizon. "This land doesn't try to claim," she said. Elias leaned against the post beside her. "That's why it holds." The words settled between them, not as praise, but as truth. She did not speak again for a long while. "I won't disappear into someone else's protection," she said finally. "Not again." "I wouldn't ask you to," Elias replied. "And I won't stay if it means losing who I am." He nodded. "I wouldn't want you to." They stood there as the light faded, the space between them neither closing nor widening. Time passed, not marked by milestones, but by shared work, repaired fences, evenings spent in quiet company, mornings that arrived without tension. Elias found himself thinking less about what might come and more about what already was. That surprised him. He had spent years believing that keeping distance was the same as keeping safe. That restraint meant withdrawal, that a man could do right simply by not doing wrong. He knew better now. Doing the right thing, he had learned, often required presence, required standing where trouble could see you, required choosing not to look away. That choice did not announce itself. It did not feel heroic. It felt heavy. And then slowly, it felt honest. When winter came, it came gently. The nights grew colder. The stars sharpened. The fire burned longer. Elias noticed how naturally Atsa fit into the rhythm of the ranch, not because she adapted herself to it, but because she did not fight what it already was. They did not name what they were building. Names carried expectations. Instead, they allowed the days to speak for themselves. The American West was often remembered for its violence, for gunfire and conquest, for men who took more than they gave and called it strength. But that was only part of the story. The quieter part rarely made its way into legend, the part where restraint mattered, where responsibility meant standing firm without demanding reward, where compassion was offered without ownership. Elias Moore was never meant to be remembered. He did not seek it. But in the end, his courage was not found in what he fought. It was found in what he refused to abandon. A wounded stranger, a hard-drawn line, and the belief that some choices once made deserved to be carried through quietly, fully, and without regret.